Anyone would like to pose a question to any of our speakers?
Oh, I am sorry.
This would be for Camilo. My name is Anna Patton. I'm a senior at Tufts, and I'm a Russian studies major. I was wondering if you could talk about what you think really facilitated the certain elements of Chechen society that became more radicalized and more leaning towards Islam after the First Chechen War, and if so, what percentage of the population that was, and how effective they were at introducing those tactics.
Hopefully, this needs to be pressed on.
It's on, I think.
Is it on? Can you hear me? Really? Okay. I'm drawing my comments largely from my friendship with Dr. Baiev. And Dr. Baiev, I think you could describe as a somewhat Sovietized Chechen, but a Chechen who deeply believed in Chechen culture. He asserted that he is a Muslim, and I believe he is, although I think his knowledge of Islam is probably less than what it might have been had religion been practiced very well. He has been known to drink. He has been known to smoke. And what I see through this friendship is that the younger generation, particularly when things began to loosen up, the younger generation became disenchanted with their fathers and their mothers for being too Sovietized, and feeling that the future really rested with more spirituality, and particularly with a better understanding of Islam. During that period of initial independence of Chechnya, there were Wahhabis who came in from Saudi Arabia who apparently left a mark with the younger generation. And the younger generation started going off abroad for education in Islam and so forth. The generation of Dr. Baiev was quite depressed and distressed by the Wahhabis, by the fact that they insisted on wearing beards, for example. So a conflict grew up between the two, which I think is quite appreciable. I hope that answers your question to some extent.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yes, I'm Sean Gunn. My question is for Professor Williams. You talked about how you heard a lot of word of mouth about Chechens in Afghanistan. Did you ever come across any, you said no physical evidence, did you ever come across an intelligence report classified or spoken to you that indicated that the Chechens were there, or is this simply just propagated by word of mouth?
Well, I worked in Kabul at ISAF headquarters for a so-called information operations team. And in my 2 months working down there and also stateside for about 2 years with Joint Information Operations Warfare Command in Austin, Texas, I never saw a single after-action report or anything tangible about a Chechen being killed or interrogated. It was all word of mouth. It was a rumor. Example, whenever a patrol had a sniper shoot at them effectively, it had to be a Chechen. It couldn't possibly be a Taliban, it had to be a Chechen. That's the sort of word of mouth, sort of passing on the legend, and that became sort of institutionalized in the American Army after 2001.
Can I add to that? From my conversations with Ilyas Akhmadov, the Chechen foreign minister, he denigrates these reports totally. He said, we didn't send anybody to Chechnya. We had enough problems at home. And I think that's the point that you were making, that it's not so easy to get from Chechnya to Afghanistan.
Thank you very much. In recent years, there's been a sort of dissemination, in what I've read at least, a dissemination of radical Islam and sort of violence against the Russian government, not only
for whatever reason, independence or jihad, sort of from Chechnya into Ingushetia, Dagestan, and other regions in the Caucasus, most recently maybe in Volgograd with the bombings. I was wondering if you guys had any thoughts on sort of the implications or the reasons behind that.
Do you want to begin on that one?
Yeah, I'll start off then. Well, as Dr. Danilov mentioned, you had the death of the first generation of Chechen secessionists who've been brought up as secularists. People like Mashkadov, Dudayev, Ilya Sakhmanov goes into exile, Zakhaev goes to London, ambassador goes to London. And a new generation came along that had more proximity to this Arab fighter named Amir Khattab, and people like Shamil Basayev, who began seeing the war against Russia less in terms of a Baltic-style war for secession, and more in terms of a Manichaean struggle, black and white struggle for jihad. And this has sort of led to the jihadification of the younger generation of fighters, who are a minority, of course. But as the older generation began to die off, those who were still left in the mountains fighting tend to be more radical, more extreme. So when Mashkadov died, he was replaced by a guy named Sadullayev, who was more Islamicist, and then finally by a guy named Dalko Umarov, who broke up the sort of micro Chechen secession for war and turned into a macro Caucasian emirate, and subsumed Chechnya's bid for independence into a larger jihad for a greater pan-Islamic state in the Northern Caucasus. And then, of course, as this is happening, you have the process that Dr. Danilov mentioned in Chechnya, the so-called Chechenization, where the local Chechens began working for the Russians under Ramazan Kadyrov. So as these two things happen, the epicenter for jihad transferred first to the west, Ingushetia, and then ultimately to Dagestan, which is where you have almost weekly bombings now, killings of Russian officials, mass arrests, houses being blown up, and of course, this is where Tamerlan Tsarnaev went to fight against Russia, to Dagestan, not to Chechnya. So the epicenter of the war in Caucasus is no longer Chechnya, it's now Dagestan.
And we shouldn't forget this notion of a caliphate, a Caucasian caliphate being created, which goes beyond the borders of any particular jurisdiction.
Well, unfortunately, maybe we could take that into the coffee thing. It's already 10 after. I just want to keep to the clock because I think we have to be strict on that.
Yeah, we have a timetable, but yeah, please feel free to approach the speakers with any more questions you have out there, over coffee and afterwards as well. So we want to thank our speakers again for